Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the temple. I'm Erin Siniva. I'm your host, and I am so pleased, honored, truly, to welcome our phenomenal guest today, Ani Williams. Ani Williams, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Ani is a harpist, a singer, a songwriter, author, sound therapist, and pilgrimage guide. She's an expat. Yeah. She's an expat living in southern France, my dream. Ani is a world renowned for more than 2 dozen original music albums based on ancient spiritual traditions. She has done seminal work in the study of sound, the relationship between musical tones, the human voice, and healing. I mean, that is just it's just like a little quip because you are just so much. You're doing so much. You've done so much in your life, and I would love to just start off asking you what you are most enamored with right now in your
Hmm.
life.
Great question, Erin, and thank you for having me on your show.
Mhm.
Wish you great success with it.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm enamored I'm always enamored by music. I receive a lot of energy by singing and playing music. Um, and I'm really enamored with the ancient traditions of where I live now. In the foothills of the Pyrenees. And I'm writing a second book on the Celts and especially Celtic women and the traditions um, and the ancient sites in this area. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's the elements here are alive. The greenery, the vibrance of springtime, the beauty factor. You know, I've just planted a lot of flowers for the springtime in my balconies, and yeah, that's what I love the most.
So you're can you tell me more about this book that you're writing right now with the Celts and the women?
Yeah, so if anybody has read the first book, which was called Guardians of the Dragon Path, it's a trilogy. And oh, there it is. Okay. And the first one was mainly focused on south of the Pyrenees and the Paris Meridian and the ancient sites along that meridian, but focused more from the Pyrenees to Majorca and the Catalan traditions, the ancient
Mm.
temples. And now I'm going from the Pyrenees to Paris. So on that part of the meridian through ancient Gaul, which we call France now. And
Right.
so where I live is close to that southern end. And then I'm really covering there are a lot of maps always. I like to show people, how things are connected in the grid and how they're aligned. And so that's, I'm working on that. And it also goes into some geometrical patterns along the Paris Meridian,
Mm.
in close to the heart of Gaul, the geographical center of France. And
Yeah.
we find landscape patterns forming star patterns uh, from
Like
the
pentagram or what kind of star?
interesting. Yeah. So in this area in the South, Henry Lincoln, my dear and late friend, the BBC filmmaker, author, he discovered a pentagram and a hexagram in the landscape around Rennes-le-Château.
Yeah.
And so in the area of the heartland of France to the north, around Bourges, I work. I'm working with an astrophysicist who was able to locate sites that form perfect geometric shapes. So he found several pentagrams hexagrams. But what was most striking is 2 septagrams or heptagrams, 7-pointed stars.
Yeah.
I feel like this is moving to the next level. First of all, they've been there, but we didn't really know about them. The technique
Right.
that really map out the placement of ancient megaliths, Knight Templar churches, Mary Magdalene's site,
Amazing.
exactly for the points of 7 stars. So having that right around the Paris meridian and in the heart of ancient Gaul really struck me as very important. And the whole idea of sevens being, the 7 heavens.
Ani, I have a 7-pointed star tattooed on my chest.
How perfect is that? Oh, wow. So yeah, for
It's
me,
the Celtic star.
I love it. Well, that heartland of France was a Celtic center.
Right.
Great Celtic kings of the Beturgis tribe.
Right.
And also, the 7 is, there are so many directions we could go with that. The 7 planets and the spiritual realms also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The 7 heavens, as they say, and also with Mary's perspective, Mary Magdalene's perspective, the 7 powers, right? So,
and the 7 pillars of Sophia,
right,
which are actually in the Bible.
Amazing, so amazing. So, there's so many directions we can go into with this. I would love to backtrack a little bit and ask you just to kind of, to tie this in a little bit to your music and your singing. And we'll get to it, but I really want to talk about the voice diagnostics. I'm fascinated. The first time that I heard about that, I was floored. I was like, what? I need to do this right away. And then, learning that you've been doing this for 30 years. What? So I'd love to hear more about that. Apparently, as a Taurus, I'm a C sharp. So can you talk more or just even a little bit about the importance of vocal diagnostics and maybe even like the spiritual connections to that as well?
Well, I think when you first posed the question, you posed about music in the work that I'm doing now in the land, and in conjunction with the writing and the history of the area. I'd like to start there because when I'm going and exploring various sites, I always take the music. I usually have a small troubadour harp with me, a little smaller than this one behind me, a more portable one. And I walk with it to the sites and I listen to the sites and listen for the frequencies that might be prominent in the site. It can be outside of the site, it can be inside, it can be at an ancient stone monument, a megalith, a standing stone. It can be in a chapel, whatever, it doesn't really matter. The site that I'm exploring has a sound signature. Everything has a sound signature, as we know now, with string theory and matrix theory, we have all these astro or physics theories that are about identifying the frequency of everything to learn about its qualities.
Wow.
So if we can go to a site and listen, the listening is the first step. I think that's the most important, because we don't, go into a site and okay, I'm going to play the Rolling Stones song here because I know that's going to be great. We have to listen and see what the site wants or what the site is emanating.
Right.
And then, trusting what we hear and doing that song. And that's how much of my music has evolved. So, in the same way that sites have signature sounds, the sun has signature sounds. There's a group called the Gong Project, GONG, a group of physicists and astrophysicists around the world who've been studying the frequencies or the song of the sun for decades, and then discovering the activity of the sun internally and some of the elements that are active in the sun and the weather patterns. So we can find this from the song of the sun by analyzing the frequencies of the elements and the frequencies of the activity. So everything has these symphonies of frequencies.
So, quick question. Can they anticipate the solar activity based on the sun's song?
That's a really good question. I doubt it. The sun has, well, I mean,
they maybe haven't been studying it millions of years like they need to.
I'm not an astrophysicist, so I can't really answer that intelligently, but I know that they can fairly predict. They can predict generally, but the sun has a mind of its own or a being of its own. Right. But the point I wanted to make is that studying the frequency makeup of things or bodies in the celestial is absolutely applicable to the human being. So we can discover what frequencies are prominent or active in a person by simply listening to the voice sounds, the tones in the speaking voice. And you may have heard about hearing centers called the Tomatis Hearing Centers. Alfred Tomatis, the French eye, ear, nose specialist. He was able to discern that the ear, the human ear, is not only hearing, but it's creating sounds as well. And he discovered that certain sound patterns in people's hearing, the sounds that were dropping out could be fed back through the ear to bring balance if there were learning disabilities or hearing deficiencies or different health issues. The frequencies that would be fed back to the ear that were deficient would heal. Well, this is what I learned from a woman named Sherry Edwards in 1991 and 92, that you can analyze the voice in the same way and find missing frequencies, feed them back to the person, and have this integration of wholeness, healing, well-being, greater potentiality,
right,
just by having all of the frequencies activated.
And so I know you have an incredible ear yourself and trained in multiple ways, but you're also, for a vocal diagnostic, there's a computer that is reading the voice stream, let's say. You're speaking, the client is speaking, they're saying something, and then the computer says, oh, this is missing, but you're probably also hearing something there too.
Actually, there are computers and computer programs that do this.
Yeah.
And it's being used in voice diagnostics by banking systems for security, for identification. It's used in medical diagnostics. It's used in corporate hiring. But the way I do it, I actually use a fancy little piano tuner, a chromatic piano tuner.
Okay.
With a microphone. And I put the microphone up to, I usually do all of my clients long distance now because I have people all over the world. And, but if we were live now, I'd give you the mic and just ask you to talk a little bit about your life And I would make, real-time notes, notating every note that comes up in your voice and what octave it's in. And I would get a pattern, a baseline pattern of your voice.
So just to clarify for people who may not be familiar, so she has a tuner that's telling her the notes. This is an electric or digital tuner? It's hearing the voice and it's telling you the notes that are speaking, that are.
I'll show you.
Thank you. So fun.
Ta-da,
Yeah.
ta-da.
Oh, okay. Ta-da! Awesome. So you're tracking what is coming up while they're speaking. Okay.
Right. And the juice and the real revealing factors are when I get the person to meditate and just close their eyes and deep breathe. And I guide them in a breathing exercise so that the brain will enter into alpha and theta state. Mm-hmm. And in that state, I have them hum, connecting the hum to different states of being. Like, think of something that you love to do. Mm-hmm. Or think of an art form that you'd like to express that you thought you never could, but you always wanted to. And when the person meditates and gets into that state of imagining doing that dance or writing that book, mm-hmm. and I have them tone the feeling that they have. The feeling and the sound are absolutely connected.
Totally.
Yeah. It's called sentics, the sound of emotion.
Sentics. Where's my pen?
It's a term coined by the biophysicist Manfred Clynes. Wow. And he was a pianist from Austria, but also a physicist. And he found that there was a commonality when people got into the same emotion and they made a sound connected with that.
Wow.
That you could connect the sound with the emotion, no Absolutely. Matter what culture or where you were from. So anyway, I have the person do that, and that really gives the inner key. Now there's one more piece to it that is really far out for people that don't understand or do anything with astrology. But at the moment of birth, all of the planets, and we know now from NASA, and especially the Voyager series of recordings of space, they recorded the moons of Jupiter and Jupiter. They recorded the atmosphere of Earth, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, etc.
The music of the spheres.
Exactly. And they were able to translate those frequencies into audible range, and you can hear them online. Yeah. So anyway, at the moment of birth, every soul is being fed at the moment of birth and at conception as well. But we just measure the birth, because who's going to know exactly when the conception was, right?
Right.
And we measure the frequency pattern at birth. And it's just called an astrology chart, basically. But then I map the planetary tones on that map before I work with the person's voice. Now, 99% of the time, the planetary celestial pattern mirrors the voice pattern. Wow. So if you can imagine, here we are, human beings wandering around, not knowing what our soul song is, or what our symphony of ketones that can release all this potentiality and keep us healthy and happy and doing what we're here to do. We all have missions. We all have reasons for being here. What is that? And a lot of people don't know. But if you can find the frequency, then you have an avenue to help you remember.
That's so fascinating. We had a question that I think is incredibly valuable. What do you do if the person has an accent? Does that change anything? An accent?
Cherise, it's a good question. Um, I've worked with people from all over the world. And just to test and make sure that the accent isn't an issue, I have them speak in their mother tongue and then in English. Or sometimes I do the sessions in French or Spanish. I've done that a lot as well.
Okay.
And whatever the mother tongue is, it's interesting that usually it doesn't really make a difference. What needs to be expressed by the person emotionally and energetically comes out in certain frequencies, no matter what the language is or the accent. It's the emotional patterning, it's the belief system patterning, it's the frequencies that make up who we are that we want to catch in the analysis.
Right. Gosh, it's fascinating. So fascinating. So with this, to kind of move back to the land with these energies that are also, so when you go to these sites, you're hearing maybe with clairaudience, you're listening with your intuition, but you're also listening with your musical ear, right? You're hearing, and maybe your harp is even already resonating, singing, like there's a string that's vibrating when you arrive somewhere. Maybe no. Okay.
That's a bit too subtle for me. I'm not that refined, but usually I will get a tone in my mind that comes in, like play an E tone or play a G, or I hear it internally like a message. I don't usually hear the tone ringing, but sometimes I do.
Okay.
So it's not always hearing the tone literally, but I get the message. And what's interesting is this has been verified by what happens on the earth and in space when I'm in a certain site. For instance, I was in an ancient megalithic site, a dolmen, a stone house, erected just about 6,000 years ago. And I was in there doing a meditation for the northern axis and the North Star, which the temple was aligned with. Okay. I had a small harp. I asked for the tones, and then I played the tones and sang in the dolmen. I got back to my hotel, and I turned on my computer, and there was a message from spaceweather.com that a pure, very rare, pure musical tone had entered the northern axis of the planet. And so I contacted the scientist immediately. I said, what was the tone? And he gave me this figure that was really long, about 30 digits long. So I had to break it down to the hearing range to get what tone it was. And it didn't make any sense. I went back to the scientist and I said, are you sure that was the right frequency? And he said, well, I shortened it. And I said, well, no, you can't. Give me the whole frequency, because it has to be exact if you're breaking it down. Or actually, I was having to raise up the frequency of the hearing octaves. So anyway.
Okay. It was a super low vibration.
Yeah. Okay. Sound. And I had to get the exact frequency. So he sent it to me, and it turned out to be what I was playing in the dolmen. And so I said, what do you think? I asked the scientist, do you think this was coincidence or co-creation? And he said, I prefer to think of it as co-creation. So here's the music in the ancient site aligned with the northern axis. The sun responds and sends this perfect sine wave into the northern axis of the earth that was monitored for hours. It sustained in the earth and in the atmosphere.
Wow.
So this is just an example of how we can use sound and
Mhm.
it's heard by the cosmos.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
heard by the inner earth.
Right.
It, not just specific to us. We have such limited ideas about what we're doing on this planet,
It's so
and yet
true.
it's affecting everything.
It's so true. I have a tattoo that actually kind of represents that a little bit. It's like this, oh, can you see? This woman touching the water.
Hmm.
And so the ripples go out until they are informed by something else, and then the ripples change. And the whole medicine of the image is what you do affects everything. What you touch,
Exactly.
you know? And I think that, we are not, especially in this day and age, we're made to feel small. We're not made to know, or we're not raised, the majority of people are not raised in their power, right?
Right.
Or their parents are not in their power. And so we are not informed of, like, you have an ability to connect to the entire universe. And now we
Absolutely.
have, like, quantum physics that's proving it to us. But at the same time, I think that it really is the music makers, it's the sound healers and the sound therapists that are really refining this work and taking it to the next level. And it reminds me of Barbara Marciniak, right? Bringers of the Dawn, with her channeled book from the Pleiadians, saying that it is the sound healers, it is the musicians who will be the communicators of the future.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I would expand that to all of the arts.
Sure.
And with your beautiful image of the woman touching water, and then the ripples going out and communicating with the rest of creation. Have you heard of Veda Austin's work with water?
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
She's taking Emoto's work, Dr. Emoto's work, to, like, hundreds of
exactly,
levels higher. It's
exactly.
phenomenal. Yeah.
And we are having a water conference in Rennes-les-Bains, a place of many waters, many springs in southern France. And we'll be showing one of Veda's videos that demonstrates when you're holding a thought of, say, a plum or a palm tree or whatever, she's able to photograph this imprint of the picture of the palm tree or the plum or the person in the water, the image of what the energy the energy that the person is holding, or the emotion or the thought, is projected into the water, and then it comes out perfectly prefigured in the image. Yeah, it's extraordinary. So what are we doing with our voices? What are we doing with the sound that we're
Mhm.
creating and the words that we're speaking?
Right. Right. And especially to ourselves, our bodies, the water in our bodies is listening. We better be kind. Yeah.
And
Yes.
loving ourselves. One of the exercises that I use in every single client session is self appreciation. Have the person think of some quality in themselves that they appreciate. And often, we can think of, oh, I'm so grateful for that, or I'm grateful that the sun's shining, I'm grateful for my dog, or whatever. But what is it in us that we really appreciate? And I have them hold that feeling of appreciation as they're toning. And bingo, the sound, the key sound signature for that person comes out in that appreciation for
True
themselves.
gratitude. Yeah.
And now I'm training other people. I mean, I don't want to do these sessions. I've been doing it for 35 years. I'm training people in an online course to do what I've been doing.
I think I'm gonna be signing up for that, because
Oh,
I'm just fascinated by this ever since I first heard about it. I think it's amazing. And I really want to have a session to figure out about myself, and what I need. And it also makes me think, when I first learned about it, I went straight to a thought of a friend of mine who has a horrible, like, he's Portuguese. He's got these very deep, harsh voice, that he's a smoker. He's got, and I'm just like, I wonder what his issues are, like, I mean, it's not very respectful to say issues, but just like I'm fascinated by it.
Well, we respond to people's voices.
Right.
We respond to if a woman is, or even a man, anyone is speaking in a really high, disconnected from here up kind of voice, like I'm just disconnected from my body. And you can feel it. It's transmitted, and you feel that discomfort of the person, or you feel the stress through the voice, and through our voice we can heal ourselves.
Right.
And then when we speak, if we're fully embodied, my colleague Stuart
Reid.
No.
Stuart Reid. No.
That's John Stuart Reid.
Stuart
Pearce.
Okay.
Stuart Pearce. He calls it the magnetic body. When it becomes totally connected, the voice, the body, the mind, the emotions, and then in my work, I'll go back to that. When the person integrates their missing tone, their ketone frequency, then the voice becomes more balanced, and when we integrate the missing frequencies, it takes on a more complete and resonant harmonic signature.
Sure.
Ringing out with all the frequencies. So then when you say something, people will listen and believe you,
Right. When you're embodied. Yeah. With that resonance. Wonderful. So let's talk more about the sacred sites. This book, your book, Guardians of the Dragon Path, is so fascinating. And of course, I started reading it while I was still in France and on the airplane home. And I'm just like, oh my God. And my followers are well aware that my personal dragon landed when we were in France. So it has been a huge growth for me, and to be reading this book at the same time is just phenomenal. And I've sat on the Rose Line on one of my visits to France on our way to Galamus Cave and Hermitage, and I'm especially curious about why don't we know, like, this is the first that I've heard about Magdalene sites in Spain. How come that's not well known? Why is that a secret?
It's a great question, Erin. And I think it goes back to, the politics of the Catholic Church and sites like Saint-Maximin Saint-Bon in Provence,
right?
Who won the bones of the day. But there was also Vézelay, and also another place in Spain that claimed to have her bones, but we only hear about it in regard to Vézelay, but also in the Madeleine. La Madeleine in Paris has a relic as well.
Okay.
I was just there, and I noticed there's a new reliquary. So yeah, she was everywhere, and for so many people, we've heard so much about Magdalene and her journey to France and landing on the shores of France. We never hear the other stories that are exactly the same, of her arriving on the shores of Iberia, which is modern Spain. And there are 64 churches dedicated to Mary Magdalene just in northeastern Spain, in Catalonia. And 93 of her sites just on the northwestern corner of Galicia.
Phenomenal. It's amazing.
She was so honored here on this side of the Pyrenees, much more than we normally hear about. So I tend to like to write about things that other people haven't written about before instead of rehashing.
Sure.
And I wanted to find things that were kind of forgotten. And such as the dragon traditions in the Pyrenees.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Basque traditions say that the dragons rule the great thunder and lightning storms, and that they created the Pyrenees. Other legends say that Hercules created the Pyrenees, and we have lots of myths and legends, but the dragons are really returning in their importance, and I think they are a very important aspect of the elemental kingdoms, also the energetics on our planet, the telluric currents that move, that connect the grid of ancient places and mountains, mountain peaks, and you know the mountain peaks are ringing with their resonances, and then these lines that connect, that weave across the landscape, the telluric currents called dragon paths, or lung mei in the Chinese. So we're just coming back to a lot of the ancient awareness of the importance of being aware and being in tune with these earth energies and stellar energies that are interacting.
Right, right. So are dragon paths or dragon lines, are they like meridians where ley lines are veins and capillaries? Or, I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
it's such a complex system. And it's a really good question. Every meridian isn't necessarily a dragon line, and every dragon line isn't a meridian. But what I discovered in the Paris meridian is that there are dragons that are appearing in the landscape that have been sculpted or carved into stone or
petrified.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I did find what looked like a dragon's skull, but I'm sure it was something else. But anyway, the Paris meridian ends at a place, an island called Isla Dragonera, which means the female little dragon or the lizards. So we have a lot of this dragon energy that happens to be on the Paris meridian, but not every meridian would be considered a dragon line. I think because there were so many megalithic sites that were established along this meridian, as well as along the way of the stars that runs east-west, right at the base of the Pyrenees. Many megalithic sites were built along there as well. So these are ancient alignments, ancient paths of energy that can be related to the minerals that create certain electromagnetic effects, the gold, the silver, the copper, the iron. We have a lot of iron in the Pyrenees. We have a lot of salt in this region. We have a lot of inland seas in past epochs. And then you have discontinuities in the earth energies that are created by fault lines. And there are special energies that occur in those places where portals can be experienced, where states of consciousness can be affected. So people automatically built their sites along these places where they felt good, or they felt an opening.
What's so fascinating for me, and forgive my naivete, that I only thought the dolmens were in Ireland. Right? Or in the UK, like, what are dolmens doing in Iberia? And, you know, at the same time, like, these Neolithic sites, and I've been to many. I've been to Ireland several times, and I understand, and I've sung in them, and I love singing in stone circles and connecting, astrally, and all of these things. And then I'm like reading the book, I'm like, what? Right? So,
You're not naive. I mean, actually, welcome to the human race. Most of the human
right,
race is naive. but most people, when you think of the Celts, or you think of the stones, the Celts didn't actually build them. They were built by the Neolithic people. But,
right,
popular culture just placed everything in the British Isles and in Ireland. And
yeah,
dolmens are in Russia. They're in Iberian Peninsula and Portugal and Mallorca and Menorca. There are some of the most extraordinary T-shaped pillars in Menorca, exactly like Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey.
oh wow, so that
Yeah.
are balancing or
Well, they're
carved.
stone tables. They're like a
Okay,
pillar, a stone pillar, like a standing stone,
yeah,
and then a table across the top,
right,
making a T shape. And we find these in Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe in Turkey, that were created or built much earlier, around 10,000 years ago. But in Menorca, they were later. But some of the Turkish archaeologists believe that, in the migrations, they brought the same technology into the West. There was a great deal of trade across the whole Mediterranean. So many of the traditions, even coming up from India in the Golden Route into Egypt, up into the Levant, and then these traditions from India, Egypt, Greece,
right.
the Canaan, Phoenicia, etc., came westward,
Hmm.
in their trade routes, and established temples and established sites. In fact, we have in Catalonia, we have temples to Asclepius, Hygeia, Isis, Serapis, Artemis, Venus, Aphrodite.
Yeah, yeah. I do have my sights on, I think it's an Aphrodite spot that's like right at the border
Mhm,
of
mhm.
France and Spain. We're told you we're going to be going to Saint Cyprian, and so looking, just going for a little jaunt and see,
Yeah, yeah.
where we're led down there. Yeah.
Well, the temple, actually, some of the original columns and the temple stones were reused in the current monastery of Saint Père de Rhodes, or Saint Père de Rhodes.
Right.
It's right in the Cap de Creus, and it's surrounded by dolmens as well.
Wow. Wow. So it feels like the dolmens are ancient technology, not just in the sense of connecting to the stars, right? But now, oh gosh, now these dolmens are connected to, well, we have awareness of their connections to the solstices and the equinoxes, right? And like you were saying, the kind of north node, I guess, of the
The northern
planet.
axis,
The
they can
axis,
be,
okay.
yeah, they're keeping, they're marking time, and they mark the times of the year, the movements of the sun. They're
Right.
guardians of the light. They're like a clock, and they, can be used for um, regulating the ritual cycle of a culture.
Sure.
It regulates my ritual cycle. I end up being at the dolmen, usually on winter solstice, or a menhir
Wow.
here in the
Yeah.
region that is aligned. Um, so yeah, they're markers. They're markers. They're like cogs in the wheel of time and space, and
Right.
they keep things organized. And then there are energies that connect. We could see them as dragon lines, earth energies, telluric currents that connect from one dolmen to another and they create a network of light.
Right.
So if the light is entering at the solstice, winter or summer, and entering into the chamber, and then it's magnified, and then that radiates out to the next site in that matrix.
I think, and us being able to have more of that wider, planetary view, then we can recognize, oh, there's a whole pattern here. They're set up in an alignment that maybe the creators had an awareness of, but following them, ancient people probably didn't even have much of that greater awareness, but that draw. You don't think so?
I
They knew.
think ancient people, well, it depends on which ancient people we're talking about, but if we're talking about the builders of temples, I think they had a very strong awareness of the celestial and the terrestrial energy.
No, that's what I'm saying. The builders did.
Yeah.
But the people that followed, right, come upon relics and ruins, right, and have in some way, over time lost that awareness, that intelligence, technology, right, and whether it's through cognitive dissonance or a whole kind of amnesiac kind of happening.
We're distracted.
Well, yeah, now more than ever, for sure. I loved one thing that really popped up for me is Mary of the Mountains. And the reason for that is there's I have a spiritual auntie here where I live who's a kind of an ayahuasquera, right? So she's a member of the an ayahuasca group church, and she has a hymn. She received a hymn from Mary of the Mountains, and and so it was from this kind of group of Marys that delivered this message to her. And so when I read that name, Maria de las Montañas, I'm like, oh, she's everywhere. She's everywhere. And also just that energy of she is in the heights, right? And so there were the witness of Mary being raised, also 7 times a day, by the angels, and whatever else was happening that was powerful and transformative to Mary. It was incredibly received by all who loved her and protected her and learned from her, but that her essence is sustained in the highlands, right? Like her, because she chose the caves. She had to protect herself, right? So she was in exile, but in that sense, she chose those hermitages. She chose those grottos. She chose those places in the sacred mountains to be.
Yeah. You brought up a really important point. And why do we find most of the 64 churches of Mary Magdalene in Catalonia on hilltops? She's Mary of the high places. Mm-hmm. We find Mary, Mother Mary, the great Mary, on mountaintops as well.
Right.
But I was focused mostly on Mary Magdalene sites in this case, and always on a hilltop. Why is that? Because we can see with vision when we go up for, what do you call it? A vision quest. We go up to the mountain to see more clearly, and having that eagle vision.
Right.
I love that idea of Mary of the Mountains, that she is from that high place that is our higher mind and our higher heart.
And our aspirations, our desire to achieve that connection, right? That intrinsic, phenomenal, Christa Sophia within her, that only those who were able to witness and be in the presence of it had any idea, right? Except for, I'm sure, word spread around the area at the time of her life, about her. I know that you talked about approaching these sites not just with reverence, but with open ears, open hearts. And I as a spiritual woman, have a hard time approaching these places with people who don't have that sensitivity. Even going into a church and or a cathedral and entering, oh wow, look at that, and it's just like, we need to greet the spirits of this place before we open our mouths. You know what I mean?
The world needs a lot of remembering and re-educating on just about everything. And I think that's what all our work is. I just had two beautiful women in my home visiting, and we're all working out there with people, with places, with putting out as much beauty as we can, and teaching about, the creation story of first woman of the Yavapai Apache in the area of Sedona, where I lived for 44 years. And I go back periodically. My family is all there. And it's so beautiful because her story can be applied to everyone everywhere. And at the time of the great floods, she was put in a hollowed out canoe, and she landed in the Red Rock country of Sedona. And the first thing she did was she listened. When she arrived, she listened, and she heard the songs of heaven. And she shook her rattle and she sang what she heard. First she listened, then she trusted what she heard, because a lot of us have lost the ability to really trust what we're hearing. Can I really hear that? Could it be true? Because there's so much baloney floating around the planet, and misinformation and conspiracies and this and that. What can I trust? What can I trust? I can trust my heart. I can trust my God, my goddess within. And in that stillness, in the still places, of listening, and then the trusting.
Right.
Then
responding.
Yeah. Then
how do you respond?
Or what we speak, or what we do after that listening. But the first step is the listening.
I think that I'll only speak for Americans. We're big, we're loud. We're not raised with sensitivity. We're given this big open land, and so our speech actually, if you study accents, we understand that the American speech reflects the land, right? Same thing with British speech. It's much more closed, much less space, right? And so I think that, there's also that kind of within it. Where was my question? Where did it go? Oh, are you familiar with Dea Dova?
No.
She's an Australian woman, singer, who goes to sacred sites and does this. And she sings and she records the land. She sings the land. And it's phenomenal. And then she has a husband who's a producer. So they have electronic music that is amazing. And she's singing in light language most of the time. That is, and she is traveling the world doing this, making albums based on land and the stone circles, the earth itself, all of nature around. It's really phenomenal. I think that you'd enjoy her just for what she's doing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I have to say I'm a bit of a purist on sound, and the way I teach in my online training and my clients is that the human voice is the most powerful instrument that we have. And the further we get from the natural harmonic resonance of the living voice, it dilutes. So we have the
Right.
harp, like the one behind me. We have guitars, we have pianos, we have flutes and violins that are absolutely gorgeous because they also create the natural harmonic overtones.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to electronic equipment, it doesn't create the harmonic overtones, which hold the magic,
Right.
which holds nature's key to the healing. So as long as she's using
I don't
voice,
think she's affecting her voice in any way.
no, what I mean is
Yeah.
the electronic music behind it, I wouldn't probably be too interested in. But the human voice and the live acoustic instruments, I feel are what really moves the energy and has a greater impact because the natural harmonic fields, like your ripples in the water,
Mm-hmm.
those harmonic overtones go forever. They
Yes.
go to the stars and back. I mean, they just keep ringing.
It's so wonderful. So, I'd love to know if anybody would have any questions in the comments. Um, so we have learned that over time, these PowerPoints, right, where maybe the dragon paths go or the ley lines coincide and conjunct, this is, could be felt by the ancient people, and they would, create the dolmens or create stone circles or do things with that. And then as the, conquerors would come, they would build their, spiritual centers on top of those sites. um I'm not really sure what my question is, but actually I would love to know what you know about the PowerPoint at Montserrat, if we could talk about Montserrat.
Yeah, Montserrat is quite close to the meridian. It's not on the Paris meridian, but it is an ancient power place. Just the shape of it, with the Montserrat means serrated mountain, serrated, and great white peaks going up and down, up and down. And anyone seeing that for the first time would say, oh, sacred site, very unusual. And it's surrounded by red earth. So there's red earth as you're driving toward Montserrat. And then you come up the mountain and it's white peaks. Extraordinary. So you have the red and the white alchemy. And it was an ancient, there were ancient altars and temples to the Great Mother Goddess. Inside of the mountain, there are networks of caves. And I know some of the young men that grew up around there and spent their boyhood, exploring the caves. And then some of the men that have programs and YouTube channels in Catalonia explore they find mother altars, in the cave systems. And then around, I don't know, first few centuries BC, there was a Venus temple created right on Montserrat.
Yeah.
And then they took the same stones and created an early monastery. There was also a very early Mary Magdalene hermitage toward the top. And a lot of people don't know that several of the largest spires, when you're at Montserrat, the place of the great Black Madonna, and you're looking up the mountain, the primary three spires are named for Mary Magdalene. Magdalena Peaks. So it has always been a sacred site, throughout time.
Right.
And of
So
course, the Black Madonna herself is like the mother goddess of Catalonia.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's so unfortunate that also, you know, that over time her energy gets whitewashed, you know, to be more palatable, I think, for the Western world, you know. Um, and eh, there's a great question here that I also had a similar question to it, but so the Earth itself right now is going through a lot of magnetic changes. So that magnetic north is not the same as it was 6,000 years ago.
Right. It's moving, but it's moving back.
It's moving back now. It went
back to the natural north,
right.
the natural axis point. Yeah, it's moving very quickly.
Right. So does the tilt of the Earth affect these movements? Does it affect the magnetism of the north, or does it even affect the ley lines or the energy of the Earth when, you know, like let's say, like, is the energy in winter solstice different than the energy at summer solstice? Obviously, we know, you know,
Well, everything's
summer and winter is very different, but
right.
you know what I mean?
Well, basically, I mean, you asked several questions, and although I'm not an astrophysicist or geologist, but you know, basically, the tilt of the Earth, because of its tilt, it affects time, and so it creates what are called the precession of the
Right.
equinoxes, and every 72 years, we precess 1 degree in our view of the heavens. So things are always changing.
Right.
And that energy, you know, if you watch, if you mark your eastern point out of from your home, you know, and you mark the equinox point, and then you look at where the sun rises in the wintertime, it's to the south, the southern extreme at the solstice. And then it moves slowly so that at the equinox, it's due east. And now it has moved so it's almost at the northern extreme, which it reaches at the summer solstice. So everything's always changing. Our orientation of light and shadow, the energy of the whole cosmos and how we see it.
Yeah.
Everything's changed. Everything's changed. So what is our center? What is our ground?
Right.
What is our internal ground? And that's why I feel like, especially these days, and the busier I get in my life, it becomes more and more important to hold sacred ground within my own temple. You know, practice daily meditation. I have mantras that I do. I have a ritual that I do. I mean, if I don't have that center point ground, then I can't expand out into all these different directions.
It's so important, so valuable, and something that we in modern culture we're incredibly separated just from not just spiritually, but from our own selves, and that having that grounded center, connecting to the earth, to the sun, that's where I'm at. I am in love with the sun. This is a new thing for me. I think ever since the dragon came in, my relationship with the sun has changed. And so I'm feeling even more intrigued and curious about the sites that are coordinated to the solstices,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding more of the the precision of timing, like Beltane and Samhain. They're at a precise point of 15 degrees, sun in Taurus, sun in Scorpio. So, and most people don't know that, right? Like, this is an actual marker that we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can have, and that's one of the things that I teach my students on the priestess path as well, is that we need to have these orientations, these alignments, right? And and to be in this, well, where am I? Okay, well, where are you? What's happening out there? So that I can be so that I can know my internal orientation. What am I working on? And am I manifesting? Is it the fertile time of the year or is it the harvesting time of the year? Right. And from that place, I can also, connect deeper to my ancestors, that were connected to all of these things, to the ancient people that we don't know anything about, but they left these phenomenal markers for us to just receive and be with.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest challenge for modern cultures is this disconnect from nature that occurred. And it's been happening over time. Certain institutions, certain things that cut the connection between humanity and nature. And we're retrieving that and reweaving that now.
Yeah.
And
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
We're in such a powerful time. Such a powerful time of remembrance, especially. And I mean, I am a self-proclaimed conspiracy theorist because I just don't believe anything anymore except for nature. Like I can't look at history books. I just feel are constantly lying to us, right? We know that the history books are written by the victors, right? And we have so much that has just been fed to us over time, things that are being fed to us right now that are just simply not true, and that we have to reorient ourselves to our intuition, to our inner world, so that we can remember how to trust, remember how to be able to discern true and inaccurate information, whether not to bring up like politics or governmental things that are happening, but just as people, of what has occurred on this planet has been hidden from us.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, and then I have to close because I have another appointment. But this, I believe that we have to have a balance. I mean, I may think a little bit differently here because I did a tremendous amount of studying of history. And you're right, written by the winners. And a lot of the history that I studied, I went back as early as I could to, 4th century Greek writers, etc. But even then, most of them were male writers. So you have to take everything with a grain of wisdom. But I did a tremendous amount of reading in many different languages, and from history, and then taking my own feelings about things and combining. That's what I did for the book. And that's what I'm doing in this book, because we don't have the story of the Celts. We don't know how they lived. I mean, they're a mysterious people. The Druid traditions, what did they do in their rituals? We have modern Druids, but they're not the ancient Druids. So I'm combining what I'm getting from the landscape, from the various deities and entities that I meet on the trail, right?
Yeah.
And combining that with the history and the historians that I really respect that tend to be very supportive of the feminine traditions.
Mm-hmm.
I pick my historians, and so in combining, because we have a lot of history has been cut or written by men who had a particular position to promote. So I think combining, the ancient texts, the ancient traditions, the history as we have it available, and then combining that with the intuition,
right,
is really a great key, because it keeps it pretty grounded. Because there are all kinds of people out there making up all kinds of things, and they say it's the truth, and you know.
Yes, that's so. I love it. It's so grounded. It's so very grounded, Ani. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of us are, just almost like in a spiritual chaos of like, what is true? What, how can we even find an orientation to just allow ourselves to be on our paths and follow our own personal truths, but also collectively healing the misinformation that has been fed to us over time. Ani, such a pleasure. I'm really excited to see you in person again when we come in September. And for those who are listening, we're going to put this into practice. We're going to be present with the sacred site. We'll probably go to a spring and sing and listen, receive and honor, and be in devotion, yes, to the earth and her medicines, all of her medicines. I'm really looking forward to that.
Beautiful, beautiful. I look forward to seeing you. And I just want to add one last thing that there are many articles and recordings and mantras actually as well on my website, that help people to come into their own center, their own authentic selves. And I would say also that if we can find an ancient practice like Tibetan Buddhism or the indigenous cultures of the Americas that hold this ancient knowledge and the connection with the natural worlds.
Yes.
If we can find a teacher or a tradition that is well grounded, that really helps.
Yes. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo changed my life. I'll just say that. Like, chanting is phenomenal. It's powerful. It's important. And that is ancient technology, Right. Yes. Wonderful. So AniWilliams.com is your website. You can see all of her videos, her books, her CDs, her podcasts, other interviews that you've done, your sound therapy, sound alchemy presentation, which is, oh my goodness, you guys, you really want to watch this. It's just connecting, Egypt with the Vedas and, and sound technology and alchemy. It's just phenomenal. I appreciate your wisdom and what you share with the world. We are so blessed by you, Ani. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Blessings to everyone.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a beautiful week. Take care. Blessings.